You go over these rare top like biochemistry, physics. These are things that normally, if you put on Instagram, it's not your normal shirtless stuff or like the hot girl in a bikini that gets all the like the algorithms probably don't even like you
Yeah.
so much,
Yeah.
right? But you do really well and you break things down really easily. So is that, you think, part of the success is you being able to explain something that is usually, not looked at and turned away from? What do you
Mhm.
think it is with what you're doing that's suddenly garnering people being like, yeah, let's learn more?
I think I come at it from the perspective that I once had. So I would listen to some of these high talks on the physiology of obesity and diabetes and insulin resistance. And they would talk about the different forms of something like insulin resistance versus glucose sparing, which is two different phenomenons that are coined insulin resistance. And I would wonder, what are they talking about exactly? And after listening to it over and over, and then reading about how insulin works in the body with actual physiology, starting to get my hands on how the medical system looks at insulin, I started to understand things at a much deeper level. But I still had that original thought pattern. I didn't forget that at one point I didn't understand this. So I would target things from that perspective and break it down as if I'm just a student learning all of this. And I think that's why people are now finally getting into some of the higher topics. They're not shrouded in this, only an expert can break it down. If somebody took the time to really listen and read it, within a few hours, somebody can get a really good understanding of what is happening with something like insulin resistance. And right there and then they become empowered. It's, to me, the decisions that, well, it's the decision for the individual that they need to embark based on whatever need they have to learn at this deeper level. But also, when you learn at this deeper level, you're able to understand other things better, whether it's related to your field or not. And I think maybe that is another component of this. It's like I mentioned a lot of the physics stuff. I really enjoy physics, but not only because physics applies to biology, it applies to civil engineering, how to, or mechanical engineering, how to make sure that the bridge is stable and so on. The same kind of structural stability is present not only in the pillars that hold the bridge up, but also your cells. If your cells have any kind of mathematical disproportionism, they're not going to function the same way. So things like that, I think, really connect people in multiple fields.
Oh, I agree with you so much on what you're saying because it's true. Even when I spoke with Naveen Jain of Viome, he said, listen, if you want to become an expert on something, you got to take 9 different sources, read them all, jump into them, and then make your own mind up about it,
Mm-hmm.
putting it all together. But so much of what we do right now is one source, listening to it, and that is
Exactly.
the gospel. That is dogmatic. That is science. Anything else is anti-science,
Exactly.
right? Which
Exactly.
is kind of crazy because there are scientists that are saying all sorts of different things, and science by nature changes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, what do you think it is within medicine that hasn't allowed us to apply things like physics and other principles? Is it big pharma? Is it a reluctance to take on these bigger subjects and kind of just let it go? And why haven't people also kind of demanded it?
So if I can take a double-sided approach, have you ever heard of like something like double think? It was mentioned by George Orwell, where you think one thing and then you think the completely opposite thing, and you believe it to be true, both those things, even though they're complete antagonism with each other. I think double think is something that can be applied to medical thought patterns. So you have people that are just unable to have some form of hubris. They are too egotistical in their way of thinking and their therapies, with antibiotics curing any kind of bad bacterial infection that at a certain point before in human history could have wiped out humanity. But then you also have the other side of things where it's people don't believe in their potential therapies actually being useful for humans. There's a physicist, I forgot his name. He created cold plasma therapy for curing cancer. This is amazing. I mean, cold plasma in general is something that we've just kind of started to understand and utilize in aerospace engineering. So the fact that this man is taking cold plasma therapy and potentially integrating into oncology is amazing. But I think he's still slow in integrating it because he doesn't have confidence that it can be utilized properly in the medical field, probably because of the non-hubris that most medical practitioners exhibit. They're just too confident in in their previous way of thinking and their old paradigm that they won't accept these therapies. And so you have these two contradicting thoughts where somebody's humble and somebody's not humble, and they won't accept each other because it's like oil and water. They just don't mix.
Yeah, I always say that I feel like they're different languages, right? The Newtonian principles versus quantum principles. To
Hmm.
understand, you have to learn both languages, and very few
Yeah.
people are bilingual, especially in medicine, when it comes to those
And
things.
that's
And
a really good analogy because Newtonian and quantum physics are in direct opposition of one another, but they're still needed in the field of physics.
absolutely. It's not to negate one or the other. It's to understand both and appreciate both. That's where I think healing really comes into play,
Hmm.
because most of modern medicine is based on Newtonian principles, over 300 years
Yeah.
established. Took a while to get there, of course. And I do think it's going to take a while for quantum
Yeah.
physics,
Yeah.
which has been around for 100 years, to get there too into medicine.
Yeah.
But I think that'll be a next big jump. But a lot of that is ego. A lot of that is letting go of that and trying to apply something new and going beyond what you are told to think.